Okay, welcome in. We have a really fun, exciting, attacking, swashbuckling game here by none other than Mikhail Tal. This is Tal versus Israel Zilber in the 1949 Riga Pioneer Palace Championship. So Tal is playing with white pieces. He opens up with e4, and black responds with the French defense, e6. Tal pushes d4, gets really nice control of these central squares, and black doesn't really like that, so black responds here with d5, challenging the center. Tal develops a piece, knight to d2, and black continues to pressure the center with c5. Here, Tal makes some exchanges. He takes on d5, and black develops his queen and takes back on d5. And here, Tal develops another piece, gets these knights nicely connected, and kind of foregoes this pawn. This pawn can be taken if black wants, but Tal is focused on development just now. So is black. Black develops a knight, which also adds some pressure to this d4 square. But this allows Tal to develop a piece with tempo, bishop to c4, attacking the queen, obviously protected by the knight, so the queen has to move, and black puts his queen on h5, which is not a bad square for the queen. It sort of pins the knight. Not really, because if the knight moves and queen takes, then white can win back material, but the king has lost castling privileges. So that's, it's not a bad square for the queen. It's sort of pinning the knight. Tal here takes on, d takes on c5 to keep the material equal. This allows a very natural active development for the dark squared bishop onto c5. And now Tal plays knight to e4, which looks like a pretty aggressive move. I think many of us here would see that black is sort of getting his pieces ready for the attack. White's king is in the open, but Tal just cares about development, doesn't necessarily care about king safety yet. He definitely will. And here he plays knight to e4, which opens up a nice lane for his dark square bishop. Black develops another piece with e7, connecting the two knights. And Tal develops his final minor piece with bishop to g5, kind of attacking this knight and also being protected by these two knights. So a really strong couple of pieces there. Black plays queen to g4, which attacks this pawn. But Tal ignores it for now. He plays queen to d3, and now maybe if queen takes, then Tal could castle, and the knight is protected, and the rook is protected. So sort of indirectly defends that pawn. And here, black pushes b6, which solidifies the bishop on c5, and now Tal castles queenside. And it's pretty interesting because you could see in sort of this position, it looks like it seems like he's ready to castle kingside, but Tal realizes that the bishop is attacking this f2 pawn, the queen is in the vicinity, so probably not a wise idea to castle here. So Tal is able to develop his pieces and put them on great squares in a couple of moves, and then castle his king to the correct side, the queen side in this case, to kind of keep it in safety. Black does the opposite by castling kingside, which is not a good idea because it puts itself, puts the king kind of near all these pieces that are going to join in the attack. And this is where Tal plays his first crazy move, his first crazy sacrifice. So see if you can find like a really strange and crazy sacrifice in this position for white. So it doesn't look like there's much, and indeed there isn't. And when I show you this move, you're going to be like, what? And here Tal played bishop to f6. Crazy looking move, just appears to give away a bishop, but it's a little bit tricky. You cannot take with the pawn here because the knight takes on f6 is a royal fork. It forks the king and queen. But the bishop definitely will fall. And black finds the way to do it. He plays queen check to f4, checks the king. Tal moves the king to safety, and then pawn is able to take because the queen is defending the pawn now from the knight. So if you saw this move in an amateur game, you might think, okay, the amateur sees that the pawn can't take the bishop, but he doesn't see this nice little queen check intermezzo combination to get rid of the bishop. That's what you might think if it was an amateur game. But since it's Tal, you know that something else is coming. And I think here the idea is that Tal just really wants to open this G file, wants to get the attack going, is willing to give up a full bishop to get these pieces, in on the attack and get an open G file. And it's worth noting that in this position, the computer says that black is better. Black is up a piece completely, and the computer would be able to defend this well. However, computers defend a lot better than humans, and I can't think of a lot of humans that would want to play this position with an open G file, especially against Mikhail Tal. So here, Tal starts the march of his pawns by playing G3. This knight is defended, so it's okay to weaken it, and this obviously attacks the queen. And Black responds with queen to h6, and Tal just continues pushing the pawn with g4, and now queen to f4. And this is nice because if Tal had just, in this position, if Tal had just pushed g4 right away, now it's Black's move. But because of this little maneuver of kicking the queen, Tal has his pawn on g4 and he has the move. So a nice little maneuver there. And what he decides to do is just continue to push the pawn to g5. Black responds by temporarily closing the g file, and now White recaptures on g5. And now these knights are connected as they were in the kind of opening, and these are two really powerful knights, especially the knight on g5 because it's attacking these two pawns and just deepen Black's position. And now the g file is totally open; there are no pawns on it, so this is going to be trouble for Black. Here, Black tries to close the g file again with knight to g6, and Tal just continues pushing those pawns and getting them towards the enemy king with h4. This pawn is attacked twice, so I suppose you could capture it if this looks like it might be a good move because the rook can't take back. But then I don't know if there's a way to stop this f6 check. You can't take with the queen because of checkmate. But I guess the king could come to g7. Yeah, this wouldn't even work because then the knight would fork the queen and the king. So you can't take this pawn even though the knight and the queen are both attacking it. So now Black tries to get a kind of counterplay of his own. Knight to b4. This attacks the two pawns, but more importantly, it attacks Tal's queen, gets the knight on a really nice attacking square, and Tal responds by getting his queen to h3. And now Black makes the series of three kind of bad moves in a row, which really creates a winning position for Tal. This first one is just pushing e5. Looks like a reasonable move. It solidifies the king on f4, and it opens up a discovered attack by the bishop on the queen. The problem is it allows Tal to get his queen to the g file with queen to g2. And Tal could not do this before. For example, when the knight was attacking the queen, Tal could not have put his queen on g3 because the Black would be happy to trade queens. Black is up a bishop, happy to trade queens in this position. But because of this little knight or this little pawn push, Tal is able to get his queen to g2 and with no threat of being traded off. And now it's x-raying this king. So not a good move for Black. And now here's the second not good move. Again, seems like a reasonable move. Black develops his bishop to f5, attacks the knight. Now the knight can't really move because this c2 pawn is being attacked by the knight and the bishop. But really the correct move here was getting the king to safety because Tal is just going to continue pushing his pawn with h5 and now obviously attacking this knight. So here, Black made kind of the final, this is now a bad position for Black, and Black makes the final error here by playing king to g7. Here you had to play bishop to e7, which would give up the knight, but it wouldn't get mated because you would have some defensive chances. But king to g7 just does not work, as we will see. So Tal takes the knight on g6, and now Black just really tries his best to defend by closing the g file with h6. But in this position, White has a lot of moves that win. The computer actually likes the really aggressive rook sacrifice on h6, but Tal plays the equally good bishop to f7. This is now a really strong bishop and pawn sort of fortress here. It's protected by the knight. This is just really tough, really deep in Black's position. So Black decides to give up the exchange with rook takes on f7. Tal takes back with the pawn. And now Black just takes the pawn on g5. So, you can see this knight is protecting the pawn. So Black just decides to get rid of it. But Black just replaces Tal just replaces his knight with the other knight. And now you have this really strong knight on g5. You're threatening the knight to move away and have a discovered check on the king. So this is a very brutal position for Black. Black here, instead of getting his king to safety, I guess maybe thinks Tal will. It's tough to get your king to safety, but this is a worse move. I think he's really hoping that Tal will exchange queens. Obviously, Tal has no interest in that. He plays knight to e6, which is a discovered check from the queen and another check from the knight. So double check, the king must move, and the king here captures on f7. This allows a really nasty check from the queen on g7. Only move that makes sense here is king takes on e6. Maybe there's a better move, but you're at least getting a piece off the board. But now Tal is able to bring his rook finally into the attack with rook to h6. Only legal move is blocking with the bishop on g6, and now the queen takes on g6, preventing the black queen from blocking on f6, because then the queen could just take it as it's protected by the rook. So black retreats with the king to e7. Rook comes down to h7. Black moves to f8, hoping to get on the same file as the queen, so it'll be protected. You also have this nice diagonal with the bishop, so black is hoping for some defensive chances here. But Tal just totally does not allow it by playing g7, staying clear of the black dark squared bishop and queen. King moves to e8, and hopefully you can see the mate in 2 moves here. Tal plays queen to d7, forcing the king. It only has 1 legal move to f8, and the final finishing touch is rook to h8, checkmate. The rook and the queen are totally taking off the escape squares for the king, and this bishop and queen, which seemed like it, we're defending this king well, we're not able to do anything because Tal completely danced around it. So a really fun sacrificing game. We obviously had that bishop sacrifice on f6, but even in this position, all of these pieces, so you can see the bishop, the knight, this really advanced pawn, they're all going to be sacrificed as Tal just kind of moves his pieces in and creates a nice mating net for this king. So a really fun sacrificing game, a really fun mating combination, and hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.